I don't know if you guys grew up in immigrant homes like this, but you go out to eat, you're getting an entree and we're leaving. Okay. There's no drinks. There's no appetizers, no dessert. You're getting the entree and we're bouncing. So now when I go out, I'm like, oh my God, are we going to be a little naughty and get like an Arnold Palmer? Like, why would we pay for a soda here when you can get
we
them
have soda at home?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Cleopatra. I'm Christy Vana.
And I'm Lynn Molly, and we're two Middle Eastern comedy queens digging up the funny from the first generation experience.
Our guest today is a stand-up comedian based in Los Angeles. We're so excited to have her. Please give it up for Arijana Ramic. Yay!
Oh, what a fun intro. You guys really have that down. I love that. I like the applause. It's good.
Thank you. Yeah. Every now and then I'll bring up a guest the way that I would if I'm hosting an actual stand-up show. I'm like, everyone make it loud.
Yeah.
In your car.
Give it up. I'm always like, please welcome. I'm like, who's welcoming this person? It's just me. Like,
I like to think they're at home. Like,
yeah, I do too. They're celebrating with us.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
One time I was hosting a comedy show and accidentally said, they told me like, oh, make sure you tell everyone to like get drinks and whatever. And I was like, all right, you guys, like, clap it up for so-and-so at the bar and make sure you get drinks and help yourself. And then I was like, well, don't help yourself. Yeah. I did say help yourself. And one shouldn't.
Help yourself to someone helping you.
Yeah,
exactly. Help us help you.
Yeah.
So, Arijana, you have a really interesting backstory, and you can go as far back as you want, but I know that your parents had an interesting backstory.
Yeah, so it's funny. I feel like my story's not that interesting. Like, I mean, it is, I guess, but by virtue of like my parents' history, you know, maybe all kind of first generation feel that way. But my parents grew up in Bosnia. It was former Yugoslavia. And then the war happened over there and they were in concentration camps and stuff. So eventually they were reunited and in a refugee camp, and then a church sponsored them to come to Seattle, and that's kind of how they escaped that in the 90s. And then I was born and raised in Seattle, and the only person in my family that was born there. So like they moved there in 93, and then I was born in 94. And yeah, so I felt very like much like I grew up in a Bosnian household, but then it's also like it's an immigrant Bosnian household. So that's like the interesting side of my story. But yeah, my parents have definitely been through a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like just because I don't think a lot of people know about Bosnian history, myself included, can we discuss a little bit about what the war centered on?
So I'll preface this by saying that it is like quite complicated, but basically when former Yugoslavia split up, it got split into 7 different countries. And part of this is like because like Tito Broz, who was like this benevolent dictator, so to speak, he kind of controlled former Yugoslavia. And so when he died, it was sort of like, oh, who's going to be like, you know, which ethnicity, which religion is going to be the dominant, whatever. And where
it's
my
the plot
parents,
of Succession,
literally, can I just say something about Succession?
Yes.
Everyone, when it came out, was like, you have to see Succession. You have to see Succession. I watched the entire first season and I just didn't get it. And I was like, this is like immigrant families fighting about land back home that they've never even seen. Like,
so
do you know
funny.
what I mean? I'm like, this is not interesting to me. Like rich, wealthy, white people, just like a business. Like, I'm like, you guys have never had immigrant parents. Like, but that's a sidebar. So basically, we'll talk about like Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia because that's what we need to know.
Yes.
So basically, there's 3 different ethnicities, 3 different religions corresponding to those. So usually, like if you're like my parents, you're usually a Bosnian Muslim. If you're Serbian, I think you're Catholic. And then if you're, I know what the terms are in Bosnian, but I don't know if I'm translating if it's Catholic or Orthodox. And then like I think Croatians are Catholic. So basically, what happened is the Serbians were like, well, we want to control this part of the land. And then the Croatians were like, we want to control this part of the land. And Bosnians were kind of in the middle. Most of them were bipartisan and just like, we should just do what we're doing. And that ended up being like the biggest region where a lot of the concentration camps and slaughter and war happened. And so basically now like Croatia has Croatia, Serbia has Serbia, and then Bosnia has 3 different presidents, each representing a different ethnicity. And they rotate And literally, like, the Serbian president ran on the premise that Bosnia doesn't exist, which is also very funny. And then in Bosnia, there's also a Republic of Serbia. So when they signed like the peace agreement, they gave them like part of Bosnia got renamed to like the Republic of Serbia. So it's very messy, very complicated. But yeah, just a lot of infighting with neighbors who are basically the same cultures.
Wow.
So yeah.
It's like a real too many cooks.
Yeah. I mean,
situation.
the Balkans have had a war like every 50 years. So we're due for another one. But no,
it's like
truly.
earthquakes?
No, it's literally like, it's like almost on the dot. And
geez.
so it's just really,
We're all due for something.
Yeah.
Everyone's due.
Yeah. Exactly.
something.
I think we need to hit a reset button on this earth.
Don't be silly. Hillary Clinton already did that with Russia. Don't you forget that that fun photo op with an actual reset button.
Oh God.
Maybe it wasn't plugged in. Wow, okay. And I read the Medium article you posted.
God,
that was really lovely.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Yeah.
I actually meant to reach out to you and compliment you. It was a really beautiful.
Thank you.
Everyone can read it. We can link to it in the show notes.
It's
just
very
about
sweet.
how the kind of grief of the moment sort of lives.
Yeah.
Would you want to comment about that a little bit, or would you just prefer?
I mean, I think
just go read it.
I mean, it's basically the piece is about what it's like to survive and live through that grief, because I think we talk a lot about people who are experiencing war and stuff, and it still feels far away. But then after these things kind of get, quote unquote, resolved, we don't there's no resources for those people. And you just kind of live your life with trauma the rest of your life. And I think I've always been really careful and done a lot of speaking about my parents with great trepidation and hesitation, because it's not my story to tell, that's theirs. And I do believe that. But I also think that I have the perspective of watching my parents live through the aftermath of that. And I think that's where I want to use my voice, for them. And so writing that piece for my parents was it's still my favorite thing I've ever written, to be honest, because I don't think I've ever been able to sum up into words why it affects me so much, even though I didn't go through it myself. But it's being the children of parents who do, that affects the rest of your life, you know, the way your parents raise you, how you grow up, what your perspective on things is. And I remember someone asked me once, they were why do you get so emotional when you talk about your parents? And I was first of all, rude, but also second of all, you see it every day, and everyday things that your parents do. I just look at them and my heart hurts for everything they've been through every single day.
Generational trauma is real.
Oh, it's so real. And thank God we have words for it now too, by the way. That is I think hugely important as well.
Think it's so important for our generation, even though it is their story. I feel we have the time and space and privilege and luxury to tell it while they were so busy surviving.
We end up being the family historians in a way, which is cool, but it's also a big responsibility, And I also don't want to do that thing that I feel some people do if they capitalize on their parents' trauma. And I don't like that. My parents weren't always immigrants. They're just people, And this is a part of who they are and part of their identity. But I don't want that to be the only thing that I talk about with my parents, Yeah.
I think that's a hard thing about when you talk about first generation, you talk about immigrants. You're not an immigrant first and foremost.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's what ends up happening when you come to a different country.
Yeah.
My mom always talks about this, about how there are people who, came from Egypt. They were engineers and they were doing these really high stakes, high profile things. And then they come here and their degree isn't honored or they can't find a job. And so they end up working at a gas station or doing something that is completely different. And people don't realize oh, I was an architect back home,
But you have an accent, so we're going to look down on you immediately.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think part of the reason why we like doing this podcast is to show that there is no one experience. There's such a heterogeneity of experience in this country, but they're all kind of threaded with this experience of being labeled an immigrant or a first generation.
Yeah.
Even though there's so many ways to be.
Well, I also think American immigrant culture is really fascinating to me because my cousins are like technically immigrants to like Germany or Austria or like wherever they live, but there's not that emphasis on immigrant culture. Like people will be like, oh, you're not from here or whatever. But like I actually love how strong the immigrant culture in the States is. And like I feel like there is a little bit of a bonding thing with people who are immigrant. Like I always bond with people. Like I'll meet people and I'm like, oh yeah, you grew up like me, or there's a similar thing, or there's some overlap. And it's definitely like everyone's story is different. I totally agree with that. But it's nice that there is a little bit of that like through line here that kind of makes me feel connected to people because I didn't grow up around a lot of immigrants. And now I've met like so many more later into my adulthood. And it's comforting. I'm like, okay, we're not like alone, you know?
So when you say when your cousins are going to Germany or Austria, meaning they're not treated like they're immigrants, or there's not an capital I identity of an immigrant?
I think it's the second part. I think people know they're immigrants, but I don't think like that's an identifying thing for them. That's like me, you know, hypothesizing. But yeah, I feel like being an immigrant is such a strong identity here. And even people who, you know, their families immigrated here 200 years ago and they're like, we're immigrants. And I'm like, we're not all immigrants anymore, you know, in some way. But then like we are also. So it's like, yeah, it's like part of our identity as Americans, the immigrant thing, you know, going back generations and generations. So I think it's just different, you know.
So you said you didn't grow up with a ton of immigrants in your childhood. Where you were from in Seattle, what was that like? And were there Bosnians there?
Yeah, so it's funny because if anyone from Seattle is listening to this, they're going to just rip me to shreds. But I grew up for like the first half of my life on Mercer Island, which is a very wealthy part of the Seattle area. And everyone, when they hear that, they're like, oh, you guys were really well off. And I'm like, no. My dad worked at the apartment buildings where we had a 2-bedroom and me and my 2 sisters, the 3 of us shared a room. So it wasn't like by any means, you know, wealthy living. It was still expensive even with that.
We're just going to cut that to say that you had a private island.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. But it is interesting growing up in a really wealthy place. And I mean, like, obviously, like I'm white and stuff. And so it's like no one ever really kind of batted an eye at me, like sometimes if they saw my name or something. But like I have friends who to this day like didn't know my family was Muslim. Like it's just a funny thing. And then there were a lot of Bosnians like farther north in Seattle and farther south, but like really nowhere where I live. Like there were maybe like a handful of other kids besides me and my sisters, maybe like 3 or 4 total throughout all those years that I went to, you know, grade school. So yeah, it was just like kind of me and my sisters, and that really bonded us. So
did your parents raise you practicing Muslim?
So Islam in Bosnia is really funny because it's not like when you think of, you know, Arabs practicing Islam, to be honest. It's kind of, I don't want to say mangled because that's not what I mean, but it's just been a little bit distorted. And I think people are more religious now, maybe after the war, but it was always like very loose in Bosnia because it was a socialist, communist kind of country. So you weren't really allowed to show your religion or anything. You kind of practiced at home mostly if you were into that. So we never like went to mosque or did anything. Like my dad would go on the holidays and my mom taught me a few prayers and whatever. And like, you know, I would fast sometimes for Ramadan, but I never really felt a spiritual connection with it, to be honest. So it just never really felt like an identifier for me. And so now I always just say like, oh, my family is Muslim, you know, because I'm just like, I like am protective of it in some way, but I don't like practice it. So I feel weird holding on to it.
Did your parents do the immigrant thing? Because I know my parents did this. After a while, we started having Christmas, even though we were historically Muslim, just to kind of fit in. Did your family do that too?
So we were sponsored by a church. So when we first got here, we had kind of like our grandmas, we called them like our American grandmas, and they would sometimes do some stuff for us. And I remember one year we got a big tree and like my mom sewed us pajamas and stuff because she was like, oh, that's what people are doing and things. And we kind of just did it like that. Yeah.
I'm loving this grandma's notion. I'm imagining like the Macbeth witches or like Sleeping Beauty or something.
I was imagining 3 Mrs. Clauses. Also around a cauldron for some reason.
There's always some kind of vat involved, It's
steaming.
Yeah. I'm honestly so grateful for them. The two that we were really close with, Grandma Pat and Grandma Mary Lou, they both unfortunately passed as of this year, but they like took us to McDonald's for the first time. They taught us how to play Rummy Cup.
Wow.
I had my first grilled cheese. You got to put butter on both sides, bitches. Like from Mary Lou, like we would do crafts with her. Like we would go over there if my mom had like appointments and stuff. And they were like truly my mom's closest friends. They were there from day one. So
and they were just women at a church who were like, we're going to sponsor
they just
a Bosnian
volunteered
family.
And
wow.
Yeah, they're amazing people. Shout out to the church in Bellevue. I don't remember the name, but I think it's the Presbyterian Church. But it's like non-denominational technically. Yay. I think. But yeah, they were just good people who wanted to help these little Muslim families. And honestly, I think it's because my oldest sister was really cute. Like, I'm not kidding. We always joke that she like saved our family because she like literally learned to walk late because she was like, everyone wanted to hold her and carry her because she was so cute. Like people in the refugee camp would like come to like go hang out with her and just walk her around and like, play with her because she was so cute. And just like bright blue eyes, curly blonde hair, like down to here, just adorable. And I think one of the grandmas, I asked her before she passed recently, I was like, what did you think of my family like when you first saw them? And she was like, all I could think is, I can't believe that little girl doesn't have anywhere to like live. Like that was, she was like,
somebody
we gotta help
this white child.
we gotta help this family. They got this cute child and they just have nowhere to go.
She's on the cover of the Save Bosnia brochure.
Literally, yeah. So, well, my parents did get a lot of press because they were the first plane to come from Bosnia to Seattle. Like everyone else was already placed everywhere imaginable, and then there was no one in Seattle, and so they were the first family there, along with one other family, and then a bunch of singles on the plane. So I was like, yeah, they're really jumping on this adorable child thing.
Wow. So you said there were little things that you see that your parents and family do that is like a response to what their experience was in Bosnia. Would you like to share any of that?
I mean, I think, it's a unique situation because it was a really traumatic situation, especially like my dad, he was in 2 concentration camps over like 5.5 months. And
oh my God.
When I was moving down to LA, he drove down with me and, we were hanging out one night and he just like randomly turned to me and he was like, I think I had PTSD when I first got here. And I'm like, yeah, no,
obviously.
I'm like, yeah, duh. But he's never verbalized that, because you get here and it's just like, you don't have time to do that. Right. You're just go. You have 2 kids. You got to focus on the next thing. Wow. And I see it a lot in my mom with like her anxiety and stuff, which has really affected me. And I've had to have a lot of conversations with her about just, taking care of yourself. And it's really hard because I feel like you end up parenting your parents and it's really exhausting because there's no way that you convince them that they are good enough to take care of themselves. And it's always like survival. And like my mom would always yell at me like, you're never going to be younger than this. Like, take care of yourself. Like, go do your hair, go do your nails, do whatever you like to do, go on a massage. And I'm like, but mom, do you realize I've never once seen you do that growing up? And so she's getting better. She's doing her regular doctor's appointments, like taking care of herself a little bit better now. But the anxiety is still so real. And unfortunately, like something I've had to come to terms with is like, that's just going to be like that the rest of her life, which is sad. And there's little things you can do to try to help that, but that's just like what you see every day that you can't really combat, really. So I had amazing parents, by the way, like super close with them, but there's some things that you just like, when you're older, you're able to let go a little bit of the anger and resentment of just feeling a little bit. I felt overprotected in a way. So
I felt a lot of overprotection too, as well. I mean, also I was the only
I think
girl.
As women too. And Yeah, I just see so many like Bosnian boys get treated differently too, and it's like, what are we doing?
Meaning, like they're not protected.
Well, I just think they're free to kind of be their own person in a way, whereas I feel like women get a lot of the responsibility of having to take care of their families. And I think my mom is very much like a feminist in that way, where I think even if she had boys, it would kind of, you know, he wouldn't be like a loser or something, and just left to his own devices. But I feel like as women, we feel a greater responsibility, or we're looked to take on more responsibility and have duty to our families and stuff. And I definitely struggle with a lot of guilt. Like moving down here was really hard for me. That took me a long time to get the courage to do. And then I half did it. And then I just decided to stay. Like I didn't think I was going to stay this long. And that was really hard because I have a lot of guilt around like feeling like I'm abandoning my family, you know, when it's just like a normal thing that all my friends do. You just move, right? You know, you're allowed to move. So
I live with this because I live across the country from my parents. They live in Jersey. And it's every single day of my life, there's like a piece of me that feels this enormous guilt.
I'm like, what am I doing here? Should I move back? What if my parents get sick? Like, you know, there's just like, I'm all they have, to be honest. Like they put their whole life into their children's futures. And so there's just a tremendous weight that comes with that I don't think other kids have to deal with.
This is something we talk about a lot. How do they feel about the career you're pursuing?
Yeah, I think they're very supportive for the most part. I think it was really hard, especially on my mom when I first started. Just like it's out, you're late at night hanging out, and just like, who are these hooligans? You know, because comedians are not like
they're hooligans.
We're hooligans, okay? And my dad is like, so wait, like you get paid to do mics, and just like not understanding what it is. Right. And then they got to like see me do longer sets a few times, and I think just really see that it makes me happy. And I think, you know, especially moving down here, I think they're like, oh, you're actually like, this is serious, you know? So mostly really supportive, and I think very proud of me. And I think it's hard. They just worry about me the most, you know, because I've chosen the most unstable kind of career. But I've always weirdly like just been really lucky with jobs and money and things like that, where they're like, okay, she's fine, you know? So it's good. As long as I graduated college, then I can do whatever I want now. So
what did you study in college?
Oh God, I did political science and Spanish. So I double majored.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, I haven't used either of them. Not really. You know, poli-sci could get done the quickest, and then Spanish I just did for my sanity. But yeah, it was fine. I didn't like college, so I was just trying to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Were you in Washington?
Yeah, I went to UW. So I commuted to school, which was, I think, a big part of why I didn't enjoy it, because
that's huge. Yeah,
I always had 3 jobs. I was tired all the time. All my other friends are like enjoying college, and I loved school because it was like my only social outlet as well. And then when I got to college, I was just so severely depressed, and I think my parents didn't really get that that's what it was going on, which is fine. You know, that's not on them. But like, I was just like, there's nothing that's ever going to make me happy here. And I think that's like when I first started having those inklings of just like, oh, I should have applied to a California school, or I want to do this, or as soon as I graduate, I'm going to try stand up. Like I was just giving myself little deadlines slowly because I was just so miserable.
So you knew that early that stand up was something you were interested in.
You know, it's funny. My friend, I saw her the other day, and we studied abroad together. This is 10 years ago now. I had promised myself that as soon as I turned 21, I would try stand up, and I tried it a week after I turned 21. But before that, when I was studying abroad, she said, do you remember like when we had like our first week of classes and we were possibly going to do an icebreaker, and you turned to me and said, if they make me say something about myself, I'm just going to say I like stand-up comedy. Like it's not that interesting, but it's like unique, right? I was like, even then I wouldn't admit to myself that I wanted to try it. Like, but I would listen to it. Like it was like this secret for me that I loved stand up, and I don't know why, but like since high school.
Who did you listen to?
Oh gosh, I loved John Mulaney. I loved, you know, Chris Rock is like my first, you know, love. I loved Aziz Ansari. I loved Tig Notaro. I loved Beth Stelling.
Wow, like you were so dialed in.
Yeah, I was obsessive, and the whole time I didn't even think, oh yeah, like let me try this. Yeah. It just didn't even dawn on me that was something I was allowed to do. Totally. So it's strange.
Where there's something like embarrassing about admitting.
being sincerely into something, like,
or just thinking that you could do it.
Right. Like, who am I to be the entertainer? You know, like, I was not like the class clown. I took myself very seriously. I thought I was going to be a poet or something.
Yeah,
you
me
know?
too.
So, right?
I thought I was going to be a fiction writer.
Right. Well, who did I think
not
that
realizing
was?
that being a poet is just as embarrassing.
Yes, it's even more embarrassing than doing stand-up. Yeah, what am I going to go do, spoken word mics? No. Like, yeah, it's so funny.
The moment I knew I wasn't going to be in like fiction or poetry was I went to grad school I got an MFA in creative writing.
Oh my gosh, okay.
And my thesis advisor was a very successful poet, and she told me the most money she ever made from a book of poetry, highly acclaimed book, was $2,000.
No.
And I was like, well, I got to find a new career path. I guess I'm going to write for TV.
I would love to read that book, though, so you should tell me what it is after.
She's fantastic.
I mean, there's no money in this either right now, to be honest. I still have my day job. I work part-time now, which is nice, but it is brutal, this long game that we're doing, and there's just no payoff for a long time, if ever, you know?
I'm very tired of being poor.
Yeah, it would be nice to just have your full-time thing be the thing that you love, you know? Like, we don't ask this of other careers, you know, it's just the creative professions. But I also think that it takes out the people who don't really want to do it in some way, which is, you kind of need a little bit of that gatekeeping, I guess. But
it's hard to enjoy the process.
When you're in the thick of it.
A very talented writer in my MFA program. We're getting really into my MFA program.
I love it.
She was very talented. She had like won awards. And I remember she was once telling all of us, like at a bar, she was like, you have two choices in life. You can pursue your dreams or you can have marble countertops. And to this day, I don't know which one I want. I know which one I have.
You know what's so funny is, like, I don't want the countertops
Oh, I
at
want
all.
the countertops.
I've never wanted the countertops.
Okay, but I wanted a butcher block. I like a good butcher block.
Yeah.
What if you could have your dreams and the countertops?
Sure,
though?
yeah, I'd be like, okay, toss in the countertop, I guess. But like, I don't know if you guys do goal setting at the start of the new year or whatever, but I'm constantly, every month, I'm doing it. And I sat down, and me and my friend do this thing where we meet up every year on the 1st, and we were writing out our dreams for the year. And all of mine were like work, comedy, career related. And hers were like, live a more balanced lifestyle. Like, go to the gym, you know? And I'm like, okay, so I literally have I'm like a one-track mind. I just can't, like, I've never really cared about having a family or, you know, anything, not in a selfish way, but just like every time I think about my future, I'm like, I kind of love the struggle of this, which is so fucked up, right? Like, I feel like I Pavlovian dogged myself into this, liking this, but I don't know. It's just, there's something really enamoring to me about the people who stick it out, because a lot of the biggest stand-ups we see today were not the funniest in their group of their generation of comics. They just stuck it out the longest.
It's
you know,
an endurance game.
It's an endurance thing for
There's
sure.
a lot of people who said that. Even not just on this podcast.
Yeah.
But
isn't it sad, really?
Just be a cockroach.
Just let the funny people win. Let them win, you know?
I think the hardest thing right now, I think for me, is just when you are talking about the long game, like, what does that even mean? Because 10 years from now, when we're talking about a long game of 10 or 20 years, the landscape looks different. So what I can't imagine that anyone who was doing comedy 10 or 15 years ago would have foreseen that TikTok is something that exists and a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. I wonder what the thing in 10 years is going to be that we're going to be like, oh.
Do you know what's interesting about that? I just had my New Year's chat with my New Year's friend.
Yay.
And I was telling him I'm having a hard time coming up with goals. And I don't mean this as like a brag in any way, but I hit a lot of my comedy goals.
Amazing.
Which is amazing. And there's just so many. And I was like, I fear I don't have any goals left because I hit so many things that I wanted to hit. Like, I wanted to be a Reductress writer. I wanted to go to the New York Comedy Festival. I wanted to do Sketchfest. And then he gave me this great metaphor, which is he played this video game. I think it was Spider-Verse or something. And he finished the whole game. And then he was like, oh no, I finished this game. But then he realized he could go back and play the game in like super mode or something. I'm saying this all wrong. All the video gamers are going to like push back on this. But in super mode, he has all these skills and powers that he didn't have the first time he played. So he could play again. And he said it was even more fun because he was equipped with these like superpowers.
Yeah.
So he was like, maybe you're just in super mode now, and that you're going to be doing the same things, but you're going to do them with a certain amount of arsenal that you didn't have previously.
More confidence. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to like the macro level of like, this industry is it changes every week, right? But I think there's also an individual level where we had somebody on our podcast, actually it might have been Fumi, who came on and he was explaining like his therapist was telling him like, did he tell you guys this, where it was like when you're setting goals,
script for one story.
Fumi, we're gonna come get your ass, okay? Sharing the same podcast story on every immigrant podcast. It was just interesting. It really shifted my perspective of like setting goals that are things that it might not actually be the goal that you're actually aspiring to, right? So it's like setting goals for yourself that are things that are in your control, right? So like instead of being like, the example you gave was like, instead of being like passed at the store, or, I want to get into this taping or whatever, it's like, I want to work on my hour. I want to have a half hour of new jokes, or like, whatever it is, that it's like, what is going to make you a better comic kind of thing. And that kind of shifted my perspective, because I like wrote down my goals for the year, and it was this huge list, and it was all just tasks. I was like, well, I have to post on YouTube. And I'm like, those aren't goals. Like, what do I actually want?
That's actually good, because that's in your control at least.
Right.
Other than like getting XYZ that might not be in your control.
Yeah. And then Zach Chapeloni, he is also really into the goal setting, and we're kind of woo-woo a little bit, I think, and relate to each other. And he was telling me like that he told me two things. First, he said, write down every single goal that you have, and then circle the top 5. The rest on your list are the biggest distractions from your top 5 goals, which was like, that was really hard for me to do and narrow down. Right. And then the other thing he told me was like, I think it was the 90-91 rule. So for the first 90 days of the year, the first 90 minutes of your day, every day, should be dedicated to your top goal. No matter what, no excuses. It's the first thing you do in the morning. And I don't know how realistic that is for some people who are like parents or whatever, right? But I really appreciated that, because I was like, oh yeah, I can, if I set aside an hour and a half of my day to something,
right,
of course I can do it. Like, right? Like, that's like no excuses. Like, sometimes I just get overwhelmed because I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think it's good to just focus up a little bit.
So you're saying spending the first 90 minutes of your day in bed scrolling Instagram, wondering what you're doing with your life.
You're
that's
like,
not good.
Why is my career not taking
That's
off?
not okay. Maybe I'll rethink that strategy that I'm going with.
Yeah, I think it's good to have something that you at least feel like you're working on, something that makes you feel proud. Even if nothing happens with it, make art for the love of making art, So I'm trying to keep that in mind this year, but yeah.
I'm having a hard time measuring. Like, one of my big goal has never been be famous. It's be good. And I don't know how to measure that. And sometimes what ends up happening is you can only measure it by other people's reactions or other people's opinions of you. And that gets really dangerous.
Well, do you feel like you're better than when you first started?
Yes.
So you can measure it. Because I look at some of the shit I wrote when I first started, and like, I wasn't bad, okay? Like, I was like one of the good ones, okay? Like, that's embarrassing. But I look back and I'm like, oh, you should cringe at anything you're writing from 5-6 years ago, because it's like, you're growing, you're doing it. Like, I think part of growing is writing more. I think it's about being more confident on stage. I think it's about feeling like you're in control of what you feel is good. And even, and it is hard, because we're literally getting feedback in real time. Like, there is no other creative pursuit where that happens. Even you go to a live theater production, people applaud out of respect at the end. They give you a standing ovation. And, like, they keep their opinions to themselves. No other art form are you getting it in real time. And so you just have to go up there and do the stuff that you're proud of, and look at every time you're on stage as a new experience. Taylor Boss told me that. It's just another experience, which really helped me,
That's why I love stand-up so much, because as someone who used to be a fiction writer, it was so hard hard for me because I would write something and just self-doubt.
Right.
Well, it's so nice to be able to go up and immediately find out, well, it's either good or it's not.
I'm into like, I want to do it quick. That's like why I want to collaborate with other people. I love it, but I need that instant, like I wrote it, I'm going to go do it. And I don't want to wait on anyone else's schedule. And I know I don't have time to make a sketch, you know, like I want to go do the thing immediately.
Whenever I hear about writer-directors working on a script for 10 years, I'm like, oh,
that's actually my nightmare.
I can't.
That's
1
my
year
nightmare.
tops.
Yeah.
For a project.
Yeah.
We are going to ask a couple questions.
I love it.
Cleopatra was a woman of luxury. What is a luxury or bougie thing you do not skimp on?
Okay, so it's not so much a thing as it is an experience. But now that I make my own money and I go out to eat, I'm like, if I want it, I'm getting it. Yeah. And I know that's crazy, but like, I don't know if you guys grew up in immigrant homes like this, but like you go out to eat, you're getting an entree and we're leaving. Okay. There's no drinks. There's no appetizers, no dessert. You're getting the entree and we're bouncing. Okay. So now when I go out, I'm like, oh my God, are we going to be a little naughty and get like an Arnold Palmer? Like,
right. I would never order a drink.
Right.
Never. Even if it's just like, a soda. And I don't think my parents like told me to do that, but for some reason I was like,
it was off limits.
You're bad if you get a soda,
right? I was like, why would we pay for a soda here when you can get
have soda at home?
Yeah. Or just like, you know, things like that. So now when I go out to eat, I do really relish in the experience of like, if I see something on the menu that I really want, I'm fucking getting the appetizer.
You're getting the burrata,
and
aren't you?
Yeah, and yes, God damn it, and I'm not skimping. Like I'm just like, if I see it and I want it and it sounds really delicious, I'm gonna try it. And then what's the worst thing that can happen? I just don't like it, like, you know. So yeah, not that I'm going to like super ritzy places, but I'm like, I'd like to have an appetizer every once in a while.
Get the appetizer, girl. Get the appetizer. I have that T-shirt.
Hey, please, See, it's like, get it. Like you have to have it. So that's like the thing that I let myself be a little bit like splurgy on.
I feel like it's very immigrant culture also to not really go out to eat because you have a mom who cooks the best food in the whole world.
Right.
Even when you go to the Middle East, you're always like, so where are the restaurants? And they're like, my mom's house.
Yeah, literally. Yes. Yeah. When people go to Bosnia, they're like, do you have any food recommendations? I'm like, no. Like, unless you want to go to my aunt's dairy farm, like, you're not going to be seeing anything that I saw. So, yeah.
Can you go back to Bosnia? And have you been back?
Yeah. We used to go every other year when I was younger. And then it got a little bit more difficult, like when we were all in college and stuff. By the way, can I just say, I love how thoughtful the questions are. They're all based on Cleopatra. And you guys would write, like, she's not even, like, from here. And, like, I was like, oh my God.
She doesn't even go here.
Yeah, she doesn't even go here. And I was so, like, I was, like, looking things up about her afterwards because I thought they were so thoughtful. So thank you for doing that.
What
I thought,
I would love to say that we've read books and books on Cleopatra. But it was like one Wikipedia article.
It's just a fun fact generator.
Went back to school and did dissertations on her in order to start this podcast. That's the prerequisite, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So Cleopatra, she wasn't actually Egyptian.
I just found out.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But she adopted a lot of Egyptian customs. So are there any American customs that you've super adopted or any Bosnian customs that you can't shed?
So when people come over, it's like a full on, you are making food all day. When my friends come over, they comment on it, but I love that. And I never want to change that. And I just think it's a respectful thing to do if you have guests over. And then the long goodbyes out the doorway is really, you know, it's
that's
like
very Arab.
It's so, I bond with a lot of my Arab friends over
parking
this.
Lot syndrome.
Yeah.
It's like you walk out the door, but then you stay in the parking lot for another hour.
It's like the exact opposite of an Irish goodbye. And it's insane. And part of me loves it, part of me hates it, but it is like, I just love how like hospitable our, you know, like our cultures can be. The one American thing that sometimes I do, and I'm going to get so much flack for this, is sometimes if I'm in a rush, I'm not taking my shoes off in the house. And I'm so sorry. And like, I know it's wrong. Sometimes I'm just like, well, it's hardwood. I'm going to mop tomorrow. You know, it's like, it's just hard. But then like, I think about how gross the LA streets are. And I'm like, I really should have taken my shoes off. Yeah.
Somebody once told me that they have friends. He used to live in New York. And he said his friends in New York will not get into their bed in the clothes that they like rode on the subway
their
with.
Day clothes.
And I was like, you probably shouldn't be living in New York if you're that germ conscious. It's
the subway is gnarly, though.
I really did not like it when people sat on my bed.
Yes, that's other people. But I mean, would you ride the subway and then get into bed?
Well,
I would not.
Yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I don't.
I'm such a germ queen. I'm like, give it to me.
I love that.
I would not want to be. No,
I don't see or feel germs. I'm just like, we're living.
You're like, I am the germ. Yeah.
I'm like licking the subway poles.
Yeah.
I'm very weird about making sure I have like my airplane pants, and that is what I wear on the airplane. And I do not wear, like, if they're sweatpants, I make sure that those are not the pajamas that I wear in the bed,
Right,
Because they
yeah.
were on the airplane.
Yeah.
Doesn't even phase
And
me
also,
one bit.
why would you be wearing your subway clothes in the bed? Like, I have to wonder if they're just wearing their pajamas around the city.
Wait, what's
have
happening?
you not heard about depression? It's this thing
Yeah.
where
Yeah, but it's called take the jeans off,
You know
bud.
what? I don't care how depressed I am, though. I will get stripped down
Yeah.
naked before I probably wear the
Yeah, but
subway
who's wearing
clothes.
jeans in bed?
Yeah.
Is what
my
I wanna-
boyfriend gets up in the morning and he puts on all his clothes, including shoes, and he wears them all day long.
No.
Is that not serial killer behavior?
That is
That is.
actually, I really hope you're okay.
Yeah. Blink twice.
I
if
will
this is a-
literally change my shoes 2-3 times a day because I can't. It's too stiff. Come on, what are we doing?
I get home first thing. We're in like soft pants immediately.
Yeah. So okay. So that's I think that's a non-American thing.
If it were
Yeah.
acceptable to be barefoot in this podcast studio, I
Yeah.
would be.
Oh, I
no
won't show my
shoes.
feet. Won't show my feet.
Yeah.
But
Not
if there's
for free.
socks on,
Not
yeah,
for
not
free on
for
the
free,
internet.
babe. Yeah, not for free, not today. Okay. Yeah, there's a fee. Okay. Yeah.
We have another question for you. Cleopatra and Mark Antony would go around playing pranks. What's a fun prank story you can share with us?
Okay, I have a dear friend in Seattle. He's also a comic. His name's Chris, and he's also obsessed with The Bachelor, and he has a Bachelor podcast, all this stuff. And I convinced Chris that I am dating somebody on The Bachelor and that we can't talk about it because, you know, like, oh, he's a celebrity. I posted like this fake thing about like dating someone famous, right? And it was like very clearly I thought my friends would be like, oh, this is clearly her joking around because she never dates anyone, you know, much less someone famous. And a few friends messaged me and he was among them being like, who is it? Like, you have to tell me, like, I swear on my soul. And I was like, okay, I have two options here. I can either tell the truth right now or I can lie and this will be really fun. And honestly, it's the pandemic, so I'm bored. So he messages me that and I'm like, yeah, man, I can't tell you. Like, you know, I just can't do that. And then I message another one of our close friends. I was like, next time you call Chris, be like, I heard the craziest thing from Ariana, but I can't tell you like who it is, like all this stuff. And my friend, he's kind of briefly watched the podcast too. My friend Bo was like, let's find somebody in the cast for you to say it is. And let's see if he has a Cameo page so we can get him to record a video for you or something.
Wow, that's elaborate.
Bo is the prankster of the group. He is like he's done a lot of very funny pranks. And I was like, that's really good. So we like went through the cast list and like picked this guy. I don't even remember. I think his name was like Chasen.
You mean the love of your life?
Yeah, the love of my life, Chasen.
Wait, Chasen, like Chase and Jason?
Yeah, I mean, how embarrassing. That's a bad name.
That's a bad name.
That's a bad name.
I had someone
That's
in...
like Bradrick.
Yeah,
It's like, that's
Bradrick.
two names. That's two names.
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, there was a Chasen in my UCB 101
Of
class.
course. I mean, it's just such a like fake pop star name, you know? It's like you want to be famous so bad. Your name's Chasen.
I'm never going to recover.
Yeah. But so anyways, we convince him and then I just start like cryptically tweeting things every once in a while and then, you know, checking in with him and being like, I don't know, like we're really struggling. It's hard not to see each other. Like all this stuff. This is going on
I'm
for
really
like
jealous.
weeks and weeks
Okay.
and weeks and weeks.
Was he
like,
still on the show at this point?
No.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is like really, I'm starting to feel bad because at some point I tell him like, oh, we're having issues and stuff. And Chris is like, you know what? Don't let anyone undervalue you. Like you're the best, like you don't deserve it. You know, like being the best friend anyone could ask for. And then in the end, I like had a cameo. I had him record a cameo breaking up with me. And to his credit, he was very cool about it. Cause I like, you don't get a lot of words to explain what you want in the cameo. It's like 150 characters. So I was like, pretend you're breaking up with me. Like, I promise I'm not a weirdo. It's for a prank. And he recorded genuinely great video. And so I sent it and I'm like, clearly this is doctored, right? And I send it to Chris, and Chris is like, oh my God, what a piece of shit. You should post this. Like, let people know what he's like, like all this stuff, right? And at some point I start feeling bad because I'm like, this is all a ruse. Right. Like, this is not like gonna be good, right? And I'm starting to feel I'm not built for pranks. Yeah. And so I eventually came clean and told him, and he like still won't let it go that I pranked him.
Was he really pissed?
He was like, I cannot believe that you did this. Like, you are like, so bored out of your mind.
Funny you keep using the word prank when very elaborate lie.
I'm a liar. I'm a liar.
Did you know that George Santos was just pranking everyone for decades?
Exactly. What a prankster. Yeah.
Okay, it is time now for our last segment called Dig Deep. This is where we ask the deep questions. The first one is, Liz Taylor famously played Cleopatra in the 1963 movie. If your life were a crossover between two TV or films, two TV shows or films.
Yeah.
What would they be? Who would play you?
A mix between like Kim's Convenience and Lizzie McGuire, because that is just very me. It's like the immigrant story, but also from the view of like a teenage girl's perspective, because internally I am that girl. Like, someone asked me like who I am, like when I think about myself, and I was like, oh, I'm still always 13. Like, I'm still that like awkward 13-year-old girl always. And so I think it'd be that. As for who would play me, I mean, a lot of people have told me I look like Scarlett Johansson.
I see it.
I don't know. I think I see it like because we both have crooked smiles a little bit and like rounder faces.
I was gonna say because you're both gorgeous.
No, but I mean, like, I just, when I look at her, I'm like, is that what I look like? Like, I'm like, I don't see, you don't look at your face that much, but
we don't look at our face. I don't ever look at you.
But I would love Emma Stone, or
I see Emma Stone.
Yeah, she dyed her hair red too. I could see someone like her, because I think she can play awkward and also confident, and a whole mix of things. She also loves comedy, and I'm literally like in my head, I'm like, this is happening. I have to convince the studio that Emma Stone will play me. But yeah, I just adore her.
Final question.
Yeah, final question.
Cleopatra had a storied legacy as a scholar and a beauty queen and many things. What would you want your legacy to be, or what would you like your epitaph to read?
I was thinking about like the people that I admire the most in their stories, and I love people who have had many different lives. And I hope that I can do that with my career, and also just whatever making it looks like for me, I hope it's that I did it with kindness and didn't like compromise my morals or my values. And so that's like the biggest thing for me, is like, I would love to just do comedy full time and maybe live many different lives. And then maybe I become wealthy enough to have a hobby, like that I can have free time to have a bonsai tree and just live my life, So that's kind of the only goals.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It does feel weird to think about only half doing it. But it is very funny how many people sit in that chair and say, like, I just want to live a good life. And then sometimes I wonder if stand-up is the best way
to do that. Yeah. No, it's, I mean, anyone who does this is absolutely insane, if we're being honest. Yeah, we're sick in the head. I don't know, I don't know if your friends who aren't comics, I call them civilians. I'm like, but I think they truly don't understand what stand-up is. Like, they'll come to a show and they're like, oh, you did like the same stuff, or like,
my mom's always like, oh, is it going to be the same thing as last time?
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm gonna extemporaneously do another 10 minutes on the fly, like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah, or they're like, oh, so do you write your own stuff? And I'm like, who do you think? You think I have money to hire a writer? Like, what do they think is happening? And so I think people just don't deeply, intrinsically, not in any kind of mean way, they just deeply don't understand what it means to pursue stand-up. And even when you're pursuing it, you don't really know what that looks like. Like, what is this going to be? And I've been doing, like, I had a moment before I moved down, and I was like, wow, what have I been doing for the last like 7 or 8 years? It's just like, you kind of become a little bit, when you're in it, it's hard to see it from the outside. Yeah.
How do you feel like your goals have evolved in the last, like, when you started, what was your goal? And I'm sure you've already reached whatever your goal was 9 years ago in terms of how good you are. But
weirdly, I haven't, because I think my goals are so, I feel like when I first started, I was very flightless. Like I was very much like, I just know that I love this and I want to be funny and I want to do my little shows and I want people to come and see me. And I didn't really look at it as like a career choice. Like I just thought it was something that I love so much. And I just felt like, well, oh my God, I'm so lucky. I get all this stage time in Seattle and like all this stuff. And now I'm sort of like, okay, now I know that like I want to do the road. I want to write. I want to have a better hour. I want to get like this goal or this festival or something or whatever that looks like, you know, in that year, I guess. But like I feel so much more focused and driven once I started giving myself permission to be like, this is not just like a fun thing that you do. This is like you spent so much time and invested so much in this. But when I truly started stand-up, I just didn't understand how it worked. I didn't have anybody else. It was just my little secret. And then it took me a while to make friends doing stand-up. You know, it just does anywhere, I think. But I was like, I didn't even know you could ask to be on shows for many years. I was just like, oh, you have to wait till they approach you. And like, you know, like just stuff, little things like that where I just had no idea what it meant to do stand-up and to reach for those things. And I feel like I would be like 3 years ahead if I had just, you know, known a few things. But
I imagine there wasn't a lot of like first generation female stand-up comics in Seattle to mentor you.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like we need more mentorship. I don't want to say it in such like a nerdy way and stuff, but I think it's so important because it's really tough for women, especially to get like even feature spots or to get taken on the road as stand-ups. And there's just so many more of those opportunities for men. And, you know, it's like either the booker's like, oh, well, you're a female headliner, so we don't want any more women on the show. Or, you know, the male comics are like, well, I'm worried about getting Me Too'd, so I don't want to bring any women on the road. You know, and it's just like there's no avenue for us where it's easy, but I love it so much and I want it to be better for everyone. So whenever anyone has any questions, I'm like, I offer the help instead of waiting for someone to ask, because I just wish that someone had done that for me, you know? So it's tough, but we need mentorship. We need it. We need people who are kind to each other and help each other win, because it's rough.
Well, we are going to wrap up this podcast. You are a delight, and there are so many fun things. I did not know that you had a website called The Foreigner, and we can also plug that in the show notes. Is there anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, I have a podcast also called Burning the Light. We bring comics on to share their craziest stories from their time in comedy, so that's fun. And if you want to see me live, I got show dates on my website. I don't know when this is coming out, but
yay! So please stay tuned. And one last thing, if you like this podcast, hey, would you do us a favor and just follow us and or subscribe wherever you're watching this? We'd really like it. And also thank you to the people who have, because Apple has deemed us new and noteworthy, and we're very excited. It's a huge encouragement, and we just hope to keep going. We love your support. So follow us, and until then, we will see you next time. I've been Christy Bana.
I'm Lynn Molly.
And I'm Arijana Ramic.
This has been Cleopatra. We'll see you later. Bye!
Yay!